Siamese algae eaters are known to be one of the best algae-eating fish in the hobby. They also commonly get confused with similar species, such as a flying fox or Chinese algae eater. I've been keeping a Siamese algae eater for over a year now. I want to make a video sharing my experience and how that compares to the common care guides found online. Hi, it's Connor. Welcome to or back to my channel. So I know it's been a minute since I made a video, and I've had a few viewers ask over the months where I've been and when I'm going to get back into some videos. So life's been a little crazy over the past couple of years, and I'm still keeping all my tanks, as you can see behind me. I do want to get back to regular, consistent videos. I know I've been saying that for a little while, so hopefully sooner than later. But anyway, I'm back today with an experience video of keeping the fish known as the Siamese Algae Eater. And it's a fish I've been keeping for well over a year now. And those videos are videos I tend to make after I've been keeping a species for at least a year. And so I've been keeping my Siamese Algae Eater for probably about a year and a half now. A brief story of my experience keeping my Siamese Algae Eater. I got them about a year and a half ago. Originally got them from one of my parents' tanks. They have a bit of an algae problem, and they had kind of room in their tank for sort of an oddball, one-off species. So we were at the store. We actually found the fish we got. It was labeled flying fox algae eater. I had previously known about flying fox, sort of was a little interested in them, so picked them up. Turns out it wasn't a flying fox. It was actually a Siamese algae eater. I went down a whole rabbit hole when making this video of learning the differences, but for that first year or so, maybe a little under a year, I actually thought I had a flying fox instead of a Siamese algae eater. Actually, part of the reason for my little hiatus, just one of the small reasons, was I actually made this video did all the research on a flying fox fish, pretty much put the video together, and as I was gathering media and doing some of my research, I realized, none of these videos and images really quite look like the flying fox. I kind of went down a little rabbit hole of seeing the differences between them and learned I actually have a Siamese algae eater and not a flying fox fish. But I kept this fish, the Siamese algae eater, in my parents' tank, which is 37 gallon, for about 6 months. And it was starting to get a bit too large for that. So I ended up moving it over to this tank I have behind me, my 65 gallon. Got the fish around 2 inches, and now probably about a year and a half after having them, they're really at their full size, which is about 6 inches. Anyway, let's go into kind of the common sections of the care guide, and I'll compare my experience keeping them to it, whether it backs it up or kind of contradicts what's in those guides. So the first section here, the appearance of the Siamese Algae Eater. So they have a brownish tan color. They have a shark-like body, so very similar body shape and size to the red tail shark or rainbow shark. They have a black line going through them. And overall, I'd say they have very kind of natural look, natural kind of freshwater look. And like if I was at a stream or a lake just near me, I would not be surprised to find a fish that kind of looks similar to this. Now, as I mentioned in my introduction, I did want to talk more about the difference between a Siamese algae eater and flying fox. I'm going to also link a video in the description if you're curious to find more about the difference of these that was really helpful for me. I really went down a rabbit hole of figuring out all the differences between them, but that video was the one that really made me confident that I have a Siamese algae eater, not a flying fox. Anyway, the reason the Siamese algae eater and flying fox specifically get mixed up and mislabeled in the hobby is because of a few characteristics for their appearance that they really share in common. And so that's that they share a shark-like body, so they share that kind of fins that look like a shark and kind of torpedo shape, which makes like red-tailed rainbow sharks get their shark name, but they both, flying fox and Siamese algae eater, have that exact shape. The other reason that they get mixed up is the maximum size they get to is 6 inches. So they get to the same size, and in terms of body shape and their fins, very similar. Now, there are some key differences. So for Siamese algae eater, they have a brown or tannish body. They have a bold black line going through their side throughout their body. And then their fins and tail are clear, you kind of see through them. For flying fox, the big difference is they usually have a thin, shiny gold line with black stripes on either side going through their body. So that's kind of very distinct compared to a little bit more natural, just black line on the Siamese algae eater. And the other thing is their fins have black markings, so their fins are not clear. So with those, you can kind of really tell the difference between the two. All right, so jumping back now to just the Siamese algae eater, because that's what this video is on, and that's what I have, is growth and size. So as I just said, it gets to a maximum of about 6 inches. Some individuals can grow slightly larger, but typically 6 inches around that mark is what they'll get to. My experience is the growth rate is very steady for that first year. So I got mine at 2 inches, and then that first year getting up to about 5 inches, maybe even 4 inches. It starts to slow at that 4 to 5 inch mark, and it'll get that last inch or two just kind of a lot more slowly. You'll really see them grow from week to week, month to month for that first year. And after that, it'll kind of get slow, but you will see them gain a little size like at that 6 inch mark. In terms of maybe relating to other species, when I kept both a red tail shark and even more especially a rainbow shark, the growth was almost identical. So they're very similar to the species. Next, moving on to tank size and setup. So depending on the guide you read, you'll see a different value for the minimum tank size. Some guides say 30 gallons, some guides say 40 gallons, even some will say 55 gallons. I will say that although they're very similar to like a red-tailed rainbow shark, red-tailed rainbow sharks most of the time have like a 55 plus gallon tank labeled as their minimum tank size. And the reason for that is those species tend to be pretty aggressive, although they share very similar traits with the Siamese Algae Eater. You really want a larger tank for those. Siamese Algae Eater are not going to be too aggressive, so you can definitely get away with some of the smaller tanks. I will say, though, that they are very active swimmers, especially when young, and they have a very kind of a darty sort of behavior, so they like to kind of dart back and forth. So for that reason, they're going to be much more happier in a larger tank. So, I would say if you get a 40 gallon for them, that's great. 55 or larger is even better. They'd be even more happier. But you could, if you're going to have just them and maybe a couple of fish at the top level, definitely get away with 30 gallon for them. But keep in mind that they'll probably be happier in a larger tank. As far as tank setup, to mimic their natural habitat, you're going to want just a lot of kind of hiding spaces. So whether that's decorations, rocks, driftwood, plants, that's going to be best for them. They kind of like to be able to hide sometimes, although they are very active as well. So you do want some open swimming area. The tank I have behind me is actually like a perfect example of a good setup for them, at least in my opinion. At the top, you see there's also open swing space, but at the bottom, you have tons of rocks, tons of caves, tons of places to hide and be comfortable and get out of line of sight of other fish. Now, I built this tank more for all the polar pirates I have to kind of split up aggression and get them comfortable in different caves and stuff, but it honestly works really good for Siamese Algae Eater as well. Next, moving on to water parameters real quick. So you will see different things in different care guides, although there's a lot of commonality between them. The most average stats I found is a pH recommended between 6 and 7.5, a temperature of 72 to 79 degrees Fahrenheit or 22 to 26 degrees Celsius. Some sources do say 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 82 degrees Fahrenheit is the upper range, so there's maybe a little bit of wiggle room there at the upper range. And for hardness, generally it's pretty open. I generally see like 1 to 20 degrees general hardness, so it's actually pretty open there. The parameters I've kept mine at, a pH is 7.4. When they were young, the temperature was 78 degrees Fahrenheit. Now in this tank, I tended to keep this tank a little warmer, 79 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's mainly for the clown loaches I keep in here. I try to keep them warm, but I also need to keep in mind the other fish I keep. So around that 79 to 80 degrees, kind of the middle balance. And hardness tends to be at the upper range, more like 15 to 28 degrees general hardness. Now I know my pH and temperature, they're both kind of on the upper range of what's recommended, but I haven't had any issues with them in this tank. They've been healthy, been active. From what I've read, they don't seem to be too picky or too sensitive to water conditions. So as long as you're in that range or at least very near it, as long as you have consistent parameters, you shouldn't have any problems. Next is aggression tank mates. So some guides will say they're peaceful. I'd say most guides say they're peaceful. A couple guides will say they're semi-aggressive. In my opinion, they're very peaceful. The one thing you have to keep in mind though is with their other species. So if you have more than one Siamese Algae Eater, they might not get along and pick on each other. So there might be some aggression there. Generally, it's going to be recommended just to keep one, unless you have a large tank. And by large tank, I mean probably 75 gallons or more. And also, if you are going to keep more than one, you probably want to keep at least 3. If you have 2, they might fight back and forth. So at least 3, but a lot of times with species like this where they'll pick on each other, actually having more of them is better to split up the aggression. So, if you can get 4 or 5 or even more, probably better, but you do have to keep in mind you do need a tank to accommodate that many. Now, as far as tank mates I've kept mine with successfully that I have absolutely no issues with is angelfish, tetras, platies, mollies, corridors, parrot cichlids, and clown loaches. Absolutely no aggression observed between any of those species. Maybe like the parrot cichlids, Maybe it will chase my algae eater around a little bit, but they're very fast species, so they can really get away from and kind of hold their own against some of those, maybe some more semi-aggressive fish. A few species that I would completely avoid keeping them with are shark species, so like a red-tailed rainbow shark. Red-tailed rainbow sharks, they tend to not tolerate any other shark-looking species, and this is definitely one, so you wouldn't want to keep them together. They probably would pick on each other. And then other territorial bottom-dwelling fish you might not want to keep with a Siamese algae eater as well. For food, they're omnivores, but they do have a preference towards plant matter, kind of hence their name, algae eater. As far as what you can buy from the store to feed them, flake and pellet foods, definitely eat those. Blanched vegetables, so like putting zucchini or spinach in, or algae wafers are great as well. In terms of what I feed them, I honestly feed them what I feed my cichlids and cuttlitches and angelfish, although I do add algae wafers most days. So there is kind of a higher protein sort of majority of food going in, but I always make sure I put a couple algae wafers in to give them that higher vegetable diet if they prefer to eat that. Now, one key thing I wanted to discuss in this video that if you read about this species is they're known to be one of the best algae eating fish in the hobby, and my experience definitely backs that up. From my experience, they won't keep your tank algae free, but they'll definitely help keep it in control. It does depend on the type of algae. They're known for eating soft types of algae, but not necessarily hard types of algae, like hard green algae. You know, sometimes you get that really hard green algae on the glass that you almost have to use a scraper to get off. Probably not going to touch that. But the softer types of algae they will help with. The type of algae that when I first put them in this tank that I actually had a bit of a problem with was brown algae. And they definitely help with that, especially on plants and decorations. I would definitely get built up on the plants and decorations. That was hard to remove because I couldn't necessarily scrape that or scrub that like the glass. They completely got that in control, and actually it was slowly over time, but especially when thinking about this video and thinking about this species specifically, I realized, oh, this tank's been doing much better algae-wise in terms of the brown algae on the plants and decorations. Completely helped with that and really got it in control. So my experience with them eating algae has been fantastic. One thing I did read from other keepers is sometimes they'll notice that they over time will eat less algae, and this tends to be that they have a high protein diet or they're generally very well fed. Some fish keepers have experimented with either feeding them less or fasting them for a little, fasting them for a couple days or fasting them for a week, and that tends to bring back their algae eating behavior. Now, to close out the video, whenever I make these experience keeping videos, I always try to answer the question, would I get this species again? So would I get a Siamese Algae Eater again? And the answer is absolutely yes. I've had great experience keeping this fish. I would definitely put them in a kind of community, natural looking tank if I was ever going to keep one of those. And personally, I like community tanks for keeping different species, and I actually like having like an oddball or two. I like to have, if you can get to work, have a couple different species. So the fact that they're so peaceful, I would definitely put them in tanks again. And then to add on to that, the fact that they've helped with algae so much for me makes them a species I could see keeping for the rest of my fish keeping journey. Anyway, that wraps up my experience and care guide for the Siamese Algae Eater. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please drop a like to help others find it too. And subscriptions to my channel are always very appreciated. Anyways, thanks again for watching, and I'll catch everyone in the next video.